Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. Welcome again to another Techbiz. This is the 83rd episode of Techbiz. This is an event a webinar where we get to interview some of the top players in tech, both in Nigeria and abroad, and to try to talk to them and see what is going on in the tech space and how we can be able to, learn from them and understand what they are doing to ensure that we are on the right track to get to know the latest in technology, latest products, the latest things out there, so that we can be all adopt it and can all grow together in one ecosystem. So my name is Edwin Ajogun. I'm the country director of Eco Innovation Center. I have a very fantastic speaker for you today with a very very top topic for for us today, particularly for those of us who are building our teams from scratch, especially our engineering teams. It's a very fantastic. It's a very fantastic episode today, and I can't wait to start. Okay. Just before we start, please notice that um, someone's going to post the links to all our social media handles. Please go in there, follow, like, and just engage with us. Join our Telegram community. Just get in there and ask us questions. We are always willing and ready to engage you on any matter whatsoever. We are hungry to ensure that to see you grow, to see your business expand, and to ensure that you are doing well in whatever startup venture you are involved in. Okay, so now to the topic of today, the core needs of successful teams. It's core needs of successful. Someone just sent me a message now. The core needs of successful teams, and so I've already said that. I mean, if you watched my former episode about teams, you understand why I really place a lot of value on teams, because when I do review a lot of pitch decks, one of the first things that I look at is just how strong a team is. What's the capacity of that team? What can that team achieve with the capacity they have? And of course, understanding the team dynamic and what we can be able to achieve with these teams goes a long way to ensuring that the teams are successful and ensuring that the service is successful. Do you understand? So for us, really, it's about what are the things that they need to have. How, as a leader or as a self-founder, do you get to build such a strong foundation from the get-go to ensure that your team has the perfect needs, its complete needs to be able to grow, to be able to attack the problem at hand and to really deliver the solution that you have designed. It's very, very important. I always say that the team achievement, the sort of achievement begins and ends with the team, because you could design the best, strategies, you could just come up with the best product, but if you don't have the team to deliver it for you, you are always going to struggle, right? So I'm here today with Wale Oyediran, who is a senior software engineer at Twitter, and is my very good friend. And he's been an engineer for a very long time. He has been a team lead across multiple organizations. He has done very well. He has been able to achieve a lot of things in his young career. Fun fact, we are also classmates back in university, and it is a very, very great pleasure to have him here today to be able to speak to us on how things that we should look out for when we are building our teams and what we should be able to do. So thank you, Wale. Thank you for coming to joining us today.
Thank you very much, Edwin.
I see you're adding weight. You're looking fresh.
I'm excited to be here to have this conversation with you and everyone here. Okay, this is a super fantastic topic. Something that I'm super keen about. In my experience of working across tech, especially startups, big tech in various countries, Nigeria, Germany, Canada, and even though humans are super complex, I've been able to figure out that some of the important things, the needs of people, can really be distilled into a couple of items, and it's super important whether in your role as a founder, as a people manager, or even as a just a contributor or an individual contributor or associate. It's something that it's important for everybody to know, to have to be able to build good team chemistry, to be able to have a harmonious an harmonizing working experience with each other. So that's why I'm super excited about this topic. Yeah. Where's the slide? Let me see. Does someone want to help me with putting the slide on the screen? I can't see it yet. Okay. Sort of having troubles trying to put the slides on the screen. Oh, okay. 1 second. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so the the topic is actually titled "Exploring the Core Needs of Successful Teams," and yeah, okay. So me myself, what I'm really about, I'm an engineer focused on building products at scale. Um, I started my experience working in Nigeria in Conga.com, one of the most exciting places to work at that time. Um, before moving to Europe to work in digital banking and e-commerce, and before moving over to big tech. So I have significant experience working across both big teams, big companies, small companies, and I guess that gives me some perspective to talk about this topic. And yeah, the fundamental thing, the starting point of this conversation is looking at focus areas for startup leaders. So depending on what level you are in the organization, either as a leader or even a co-founder or even a contributor, like one of the important things, this is some of the areas that you find yourself focusing on areas like vision, figuring out the vision of the company, figuring out the growth, figuring out your strategy, solving funding, and managing people, and so many other areas. I don't claim to be an expertise in being a co-founder, being an expert in being a co-founder, or but I generally read about some of these things, and I can find that in every area that startup leaders are focused on about, all every article I've read, every book I've read, every person I've talked to, they would always highlight that one of the key focus areas that they have to do as part of their day-to-day job is managing people. Some people have this in different areas. So it could be compensation, it could be mentorship, it could be figuring out the culture. All of this essentially narrow down to pretty much the same thing. It's really about people, and it's quite challenging, especially for a startup where things are at the early stage. You're trying to figure out what the vision is, what the product direction is, and you also have the same job to manage the people that you bring on board to help you with this vision. And humans are generally the most complicated of every part um, of your focus areas. Humans are generally difficult to manage, and that's essentially is the center theme of this topic, figuring out the human areas. Also, most of the conversations that tend to happen, that we tend to be exposed to, are usually focused around areas of what people bring to the team, who you should hire, like what you have to offer them, like what they bring to the team, who are the right people to bring in at the early stage, generalists, specialists, and some of all these concepts. A less often talked about parts are the less often talked about areas are things around what people really need. Like, so I have decided to bring this person up on my team, or I've decided to hire this person. What ticks this person? What motivates this person beyond the skills, the technical and human people skills that this person brings to the table, to the job, to grow this venture that I have started? What does this person really need? What does he want from me? I think figuring out what people need is central to things like employee retention. How do you retain this person? If you don't really understand what they want, it's quite difficult to retain people. Especially this is even quite important in this competitive market for talent in early stage ventures is essentially quite competitive as the global borders start to erase, where people are exposed to jobs across different continents, it becomes especially important to kind of figure out what people really need to give you a chance to actually retain these people. And that brings us to the focus area that I want to narrow and how I want to approach this topic. Uh, I started to read about the psychology of some of these things, and I encountered an approach that speaks to me a lot in terms of people. I was able to see that all of the thoughts I've had could essentially be narrowed down to this topic that um, this person actually highlighted, and that's someone called Paloma Medina. She was able to essentially distill people's needs, human needs. So this just doesn't just apply to startups. It applies to pretty much humans in all endeavors. So that's why it's even more important to look at this from from the context of startups. So she distilled human needs to something called Biceps. So that's B stands for belonging, I improvement, and also progress. C for choice, E for equality and fairness, P for predictability, and S for significance. I would hope that this is something you would potentially go and research, go and read about, even after this session. There's so much to grasp about this topic, and we will just try and see how we can talk about this within the concepts of ventures, early stage ventures, mid stage ventures, and see how it helps us understand the people that we work with, the team that we are building, and what makes people tick. So we'll start from the first one, which is really belonging. Like, so first is that this isn't necessarily the order in which people it's important to people. So it's not really in any order. I guess biceps just is just an acronym that sort of was able to bring together all these points. So it doesn't necessarily represent the order in which it's important to people. And people are different. So it's extremely normal to find out that not all of this tick to everybody. Like some of these points might be that for me it's significance, for someone else choice is the most important. And that's one of the at the end of this thing, one of the take home parts of this that I like people to do is ask people that you work with, ask your team members, like try to talk about all of this with them and try to see which one makes them tick. Ask them perhaps to choose the top two, like which of this means the most to you if you were to choose two. And the difference you will start to tell you a lot about different people and what's important to them and how you can use that to your advantage as a leader in essentially molding your team. So the first one of these qualities that I want to talk about is belonging. So the central principle is that humans generally have a need to be part of something big. Like there is an underlying need to be part of something big. That's why you find out that as a company grows, they start to see lots as they start to see a lot of traction. Like it's quite easier for them. It becomes fairly easy for them to hire. It's they start to get lots of attention, they get lots of investor attention, and all of this. All of this is centered around the human need to belong, to be part of something big. And this becomes very important whether you already have your team, whether you are starting to form your team. It's important at that point. It's important to everybody, like to give people a sense of belonging. So you would find out that this is why that's why like pretty much many organizations try to figure out what their vision is. Like they spend a lot of money. People hire consultants just to be able to help them narrow all of their ideas into perhaps one vision statement, because this would be like a a central call, how you call people to order, how you call people to the same objective, because humans have a central need to belong to something big, to belong to something exciting. So you find out that people like Google, they create big identities. So okay, for example, when you get if you become an if you get hired by Google, people start to address you as a if you get hired by Google, people start to address you as a Googler. And it's insane how just something that small gives people a huge sense of belonging. Not just people that are inside, but people that are outside. Yes, it makes them aspire to be part of this thing because this really sounds exciting. And I think that's why like many of all these companies, they all try to give themselves a name. They try to provide people with t-shirts. They try to give people some of all these things. And they are essentially calling to the parts of people that want to be part of something big. And so they can potentially sometimes people inflate what you actually are, which is fine. Like that's where we're going. You paint this big picture of what we want to be. You also use this in recruiting calls, like this is what we are, this is where we're going, like giving people that sense of belonging, people that are inside, and also drawing that line, making it sound exciting, painting it pretty decent is what also helps attract people that are outside of your venture. And because you paint that, yeah, we belong to this thing, we belong to this big, to this thing that is really big. And that's quite important in team building. Your team has to have that sense of belonging. Um, Next one that I want to talk about is improvement, progress. Uh, okay, with this one, okay, this is for maybe engineering teams. I figured out that it all of the engineers that I have spoken to, that I have worked with, if you ask them to take three out of these six, improvement and progress is always going to be part of this. I it's the only one that I have seen that is that consistent across engineering teams. So I'm curious to see how this would potentially be outside of engineering teams to see like what particular item on this list actually shows up the most. So it's probably something you can try out in your various organizations. Try to see what's is there any common theme around all the people that we have hired. Perhaps it's going to say a lot more about what you're building, about your hiring practice and things like that. Also, that I don't necessarily think there's any one that is more important than the other, but it means different things to different people. It was just something very surprising that I talked to about maybe 11, 15 people, and all of them had improvements as part of the top three needs that they always wanted. And it's also one of the top ones for me. It's probably, for me, I think this would probably also be number one, really. And so, improvement is that there's a need to see that today is better than yesterday. That's pretty much my way of distilling the topic, the concept of improvement. That so it does not just mean like it doesn't just mean me personally. It also applies to a team, knowing that we are better off today than yesterday. So this could be in our abilities, it could be in our skills, it could be in terms of compensation, like the need to know that today is better than yesterday. It also applies to your organization, like you want to be showing metrics, progress metrics about the organization, what we are doing better, what wins we made. Like people need to know these things. People, so you can look at it from three perspectives. The individual, there's a individual need to be better at something every day, to make small improvements, to make grow, to be good, to be seen to be growing. So it could it could just be in terms of like, oh, I am able to use, thanks to some of the things that we're doing in this company, I'm able to use Excel better than I was today. People don't want to be stagnant or even regress. So you have to think about it, and depending on who you're dealing with, how important it is to them. One of the core ways of keeping your team of is to show that progress, that improvement to them. So it could be in terms of their competencies, like every month highlighting areas that they have improved, areas that they need to improve, and like make a plan for that to happen. So that's on an individual perspective. Then also on a team perspective, it could be from making metrics that are important to the team. So, for example, you have an accounting team, hypothetically, and they can see that every day we are making savings, we are making cost savings in terms of thanks to some of the work that we are putting in, or we are able to make people more efficient in terms of how they work. Or it's a sales team, you're able to show that thanks to the work that you're doing, we're able to make sales improvements daily. So it's not enough for you to just hold some of this information to yourself or just to the investors. It's actually critical. Some of this information that you have in terms of the success that you are making today, it's actually important into keeping some people happy. You'll be surprised how much that goes a long way into potentially keeping somebody that you have on your team, rather than the competitor being able to take them knowing that they are making improvements. And also the organization. Like when I worked in Nigeria, one of the things that I probably didn't like a lot was that, like, the senior, what I would say, the executive level, most of the time there's always the need to look good to investors and all of these things. There's almost no incentive to sort of show some of these things to the employees. And it almost seems like you could draw a line between the company and like, okay, these are like maybe the top 10 people in the company, and that's all. The company is essentially just focusing on all of these people and not sharing a lot of information with people downstream. And I think it's like it's not good enough. It's shooting yourself in the leg, because many of these people that you potentially call individual contributors that are just working on a narrow set of things, narrow set of features or concepts, they are critical into. They are essentially the builders. They're people that make things actually happen. And I think showing this progress that you're making, that the organization is making, is super important for every organization. It's super important into making a team very healthy. So yeah, that's improvement. Like there's a core need to see that today is better than yesterday. So both on an individual level, at an organizational level, and also at the team level. Oh yeah, this one's also one of my favorite choice. It showed up in my top three, and um, there is a need. Humans have a need to have a sense of autonomy. Like it varies across various stages of people's career. For example, as people start to get higher in maybe okay at the beginning of someone's career as an intern, like it's probably not the most important thing for someone starting their career afresh, for example. They just want to prove that they belong. They just want to prove that they are capable and things like that. So they're happy to do anything that you offer them to do and things like that. But as people grow, as people grow from um, associates into partners, into executives and things like that, you will find out that the need for autonomy grows. Like thanks to their experience, they have a bigger picture about how things should be, how the world should be, how an organization should be. They have all of this picture in their head. They have developed some of these thanks to some of the experience that they bring, and it's important to give people that sense of choice in things that they do. And I know that it can be quite difficult to reconcile, especially for startups, whereby like it's sometimes difficult to offer this sense of choice. But I think that it can be fixed from hiring. Like when you when you hire the right people, like people that believe in what you're doing and things like that, especially at the senior level, you create that alignment. You are able to essentially hire people that are pretty much closely aligned with your goal. That people that their life objectives, you can see it crossing paths with the vision that you have for the organization. You find out that when you hire people like that, it's not unusual. It becomes quite easy for their range of choices to fall within the growth areas that you already see or the vision areas that you actually see for your organization. So that's where I think like it can the parts that conflicts with startup goals and objectives can really be solved. But you have to keep it at the back of your mind that people want that freedom of choice. Like you can have like so it's important. So when you have like a range of things you want to build, you want to sort of push it to people, like let people you want to get opinion from people in terms of what they think about this topic. Of course, but if you are the CEO or the founder or something like that, at the end of the day, all of it, the final decision on things fall to you. But you always still have that responsibility, especially for fairly experienced people, to give them that sense of choice. Like, okay, we have these options. These are what do you think about this? Like, what would you like to see? What would you like to do? We have this direction. What would you like to see? Like asking that question, giving people that sense of choice to make choices as well is super important in team. And for example, for me, it's super critical. Like in the last two places I've worked, for example, like that's the things I would say I like the most. Like I I have I have a free will in terms of determining direction of course not the entire big picture, but I can see the objectives of the company, and I develop a sense of what I think is going to improve these objectives or which is going to deliver the key results that this organization is looking for. And I design strategy documents or things like that to help me. So it's not a case whereby oh my boss just designs all of the documents and just hands it over to me and say okay, well you just go and do this thing. No, it's more like giving guidance. Okay, they tell me that okay, this is what I want. This is the direction we are moving towards. How do you think we can achieve this? Like it gives people that sense of power, which people really want. So you have to know people who want these things already. So you have to give them that sense of choice. So of course, yeah, it could be the range could be bigger at a very high level, and the range could be smaller on the very on lower down the contribution ladder. But you still have to be seen to give that choice option in terms of what people want to do and how people see things. So that's the choice part of biceps. Yeah. Okay. This one is fairly self-explanatory. I guess, it's maybe the easiest to comprehend and to understand why people want equality. Always, people always want to be treated fairly. maybe they even want to be treated better than others. I don't know if people really want to be treated better than others. I personally don't want to be treated, be given preference more than the other person. But I also, more importantly, don't want to be treated less than uh, the other person. It probably doesn't rank amongst. It's probably not something I would mention or most people would mention, but I would say it's a deal breaker for many people. Or as you go up the ladder, it becomes a deal breaker for people. Like when people start to get the sense that hey, you're treating someone less than the other person, then as they when they have power, they would reject that notion because it's important to everybody to be treated equally. And it's quite easy for people, especially in the world that we live in, where certain demographics of people have there's a tendency to treat them less than the other. For example, the most common thing is pay equity. Like all over the world, it's clear that um, women are generally paid less for the same amount of work. For this is like lots of research have gone into this, and it's fairly proven that for the same amount of work in many places, I'm not saying everywhere, many places, most places actually, I believe it's most places, women are paid less than the other, less than men. And it's not just based on gender, it's not based on just gender. There are many other factors. For example, maybe disabled people or uh, paid less than their able-bodied counterpart and things like that. It's pretty much commonplace, and it's sad. It's pretty. It's ideally it's one that everybody would reject off the top of their head. Like once you put the notion to anybody, the first thing is that they go defensive and like, but you'd have to really. It takes a level of maturity to step back and step outside the box and really look at things from a different perspective and see if we're really treating everybody equally. It could be access to information, for example, like knowing everything that is relevant for me to do my job, not just hiding things and like. So of course, I understand that you want to demarcate information and make sure that people have just what they need to do their job, but you have to be careful to make sure that you're not treating certain demographics or certain people less than you're treating others. It's super important for people to feel the sense that they are being treated equally. One of, for example, like in places of work, it's not unusual for people in the same level and things like that to be paid more than the other. Salary negotiation is one of the most salary compensation determination is one of the hardest things in ventures. And for example, one of the ways that people have solved that, or people are trying to solve that, is by providing providing clarity around how this is determined. You see some companies they're publishing their salary bands, for example. You'd see that okay, for this level, this is the pay. So everybody has a sense of where they are in this band. So if I decide that, for example, for this sales associate in my company, the salary band is between 150K and 200K. If I'm open enough to put that out there, anybody earning 150K will understand that they're at the bottom of the band. Like, so if they feel like they are treated fairly, okay, perhaps they are just a new addition in the team, perhaps they don't have enough experience in sales, uh, perhaps they're just crossing career, they can understand that, okay, yeah, I still have to prove myself to be able to get to the top of this band, and that's fair. So people know. But when you now have a case whereby um, someone who's experienced, who's treated, who has always delivered on their metrics. They see that they're being paid at the bottom of the band. So now they're curious, like then they can have conversations with you. So when people feel that need to be able to have that conversation and to have that clarity into how you determine some of these things, like they feel more secure. They feel they understand what's going on. So it's super important. It's hard. Some of these things are hard, but they might not be the best thing in the short term. But when you have a long-term thinking, you'd see how this essentially plays into your hands, into achieving stability, into uh, nurturing that ideal team that you really want to see out there. Um, Next one is the biceps is predictability. Yeah, this one, like, it's it's weird. Like, people want to know what's coming. Like, it's fairly easy. That's why, for example, when there are rumors about the state of the company and things like that, it affects people's morale so much. An easy example is, I think, this UK sanctions thing when Chelsea Football Club was sanctioned and things like that. Like, the the idea of not knowing what's coming, like, it's it puts it puts people in in a weird state. There are rumors, there are this thing. So in a possible universe, it's not unusual to see how this affects the performance of people. Maybe in Chelsea, I have not actually seen that scenario happen, but you get the idea. Generally, yeah, it sort of affects morale when people don't know what's coming. So this is not just in areas about the state of the company and things like that. It could be in team organization, and it's also the others for startups, because startups generally, by their nature, they're not like, predictability is maybe the least ranked attribute of a startup, because it's not unusual for people to pivot, for example, because, okay, something is not working, and this is the area we have to do for survival and things like that. So yeah, I totally get that. But this is just showing you what people want. So this is the state of people. So even though we are working in a venture that is not quite predictability, that is not quite predictable, you can't delude yourself by pretending that predictability is not something that your employees or your team members or people you work with care about. People care about predictability. So it is sort of your job as a leader to balance this out, to balance the unpredictability of a startup with the need for predictability that people need. So it could be in terms of making things more clear, um, setting up the team in a longer term, like, not just shoveling people. Hey, go do this today, go do this tomorrow. People should have a very good idea of what they're going to do tomorrow, pretty much by now. So there's a need for predictability, and that's something that you have to figure out. Like, you have to figure out how you want to offer this to in the level that you're able to. And the last one is significance. And what's weird about significance is that when you highlight all of this to people, it doesn't usually show up at the top of people's list. But what's weird is that when people think deeply about it, they see that significance ranks up there amongst your list. So when I first walked through when I was learning about some of these things, uh, I initially rated significance last of the things that matter to me. Like, oh, I don't care about uh, being recognized. I care about improving every day. I care about being treated fairly. I care about having autonomy and all of these things. And that's the way I sort of ranked myself. But after looking at this deeply, I realize that even though I may not admit it, I think it's super important for me to be recognized for the value I provided. And that's essentially what significance highlights. People want, like, they don't necessarily need you to overbloat their achievement and things like that. But if I do this thing, um, I want to receive the credit for it. I want I want to receive the credit for this job, and or also, if I'm doing the job of a senior engineer, for example, or a senior executive, I want to be promoted to that level because you can clearly see that I can do it. So there is a human need to be recognized for the value they provide. I saw someone's tweet on Twitter a couple of days ago. They talked about how even though it was a designer, they talked about how their lead designer sort of receives the credit for some of the work, but their lead designer was always quick to attribute the work to the actual people that did the work. And I was super excited about that idea that okay, you might be the leader, you might be the one taking all of the credit, but you must be seen to be giving the right credit to people. So even though you are called for to collect an award, it's fine for you to potentially um, ask someone on your team to come with you, introduce them to people, let people know, let people know them for the contribution that they provided, and not just take all of it as for yourself as a leader. So that's biceps. That's biceps in a quick summary. There's a link in the slide to read more about Paloma's work into highlighting how biceps is important to people. Just a quick thing that I think anyone can actually do is talk to people that you work with. Try to ask them what are the two most important things to them on this list, and it will give you a perspective um, into what moves people, what drives different people, and you'll be surprised how much you see that okay, some of these things might be easy, and it gives you a greater chance to be able to retain talent, for example, because you are not just relying on oh they're collecting their salary at the end of the month, but you're actually able to speak to the things that drive them the most. And so there's no one size fits all. It's different for different people. So it's your job as a leader to treat different people the same way humans have love languages in the romantic relationship context. People also have core need languages, and it's your job as a leader to figure out how to speak to different people to achieve to achieve optimal team chemistry. So yeah, that's pretty much all of it. I'll be excited to hear your thoughts, to hear your questions about this, to hear your opinions, if, maybe on the webinar or also outside of this. Thank you very much, Edwin.
Thank you, Wale, thank you so much. It's very, very interesting and very, very insightful. I really, really thank you. You've been very, very, very articulate in your thoughts, and you've been able to contribute a lot to our zeitgeist, honestly. I just want to ask, yeah, this is from me, before you even start getting photos from people that are viewing or everywhere. A lot of the things you've mentioned really comes down to the ability of the leader to step away from his ego, from his own space, and recognize what is around him and be emotionally intelligent. How would you say, I mean, is there some kind of way that we can be able to train some kind of training that we can put people through to be able to achieve that kind of level of self-consciousness?
Yeah, that's exciting. That's a very interesting conversation. To be honest, there are lots of trainings and things like that. Number one, the Paloma actually highlighted if you she highlighted a couple of activities that people can do that leaders can do. For example, let me see. Um, she highlighted some coaching questions. So if you are an engineering leader, there are some questions that, or not engineering leader, like a leader generally, there are some questions that you can, can there's some questions that you can actually ask um, people that you work with, for example, to see what works for them, to see to help you understand them better. So some of all of these things are the link is in the slide to some questions around figuring out goals for different people to see what drives them. But most of all, what I see, the most important thing is the need to do this thing. Like the need to know that there is work to classify some of these things as work. Like these are part of the things that we have to do. So it could be from setting out time with your team. For example, it could be monthly, it could be quarterly, setting out that 1 or 2 hours generally to have your team talk about. You could talk about this together, not necessarily like a leader, one person, one-on-one situation. We will talk about this as a team together just to try to understand other people, to figure out, okay, what's important to this. Like listen to different people's perspective, why that is important to them. It's possible that it might be something about their childhood that makes them um, makes them align towards certain things first. So that's why it's quite important. The most important thing is that it is work, it takes effort, and you have to see it just as important as other areas as a leader. For example, it's just as important as making a strategy document for your team or making a vision statement for your team. It is just as important to figure out um, what makes people tick and trying to get to the root of it. So there are lots of questions and activities in that link around exploring this topic that I would encourage people to try out.
Okay. Thank you so much. Can you share the document with us?
Ah, yeah, yes.
Yeah, like share not the presentation, the what you just showed, but share with us. We can share it in our um in tech-based community. I'm sure they would like to know a lot about this. So thank you so much. Does anyone has a question? If you're watching us from social media, if you're streaming, unfortunately for you guys that like to come and watch the videos afterwards, these are the kind of things that you miss out on. But if you're streaming and you want to ask some questions, can you please ask someone to send the message now? Oh, okay, that was you. Cool. I don't know if anyone has a question. I'm sure the team is watching all over social media to see they're going to post anything anywhere. Before we come up with that, I'm just asking one more question. So, in your experience in leading teams, what did you say is your biggest challenge?
Ah, um, it's people. People are essentially super complicated. People are different. That's one of the things. Okay, for example, one of the biggest challenges I have had so far in my career with teams was I was working in this team where people, about half of the team were Russian speaking. So English was not the first language, but the work environment, English is the official work environment where we essentially that's language to communicate across our team. And in this particular team, about there was about maybe 8 of us or thereabouts, and about 3 or 4 people are Russian speaking. So maybe Belarus, Russia, Ukraine, and things like that. But they all were able to speak this language. Then the rest of us, we had Indian, Nigerian, German, and things like that. And you find out that even in team setup, they prefer this Russian group prefer to speak in Russian, and of course it's fine. Like I can speak in Yoruba to a Yoruba colleague and things like that. But it started to apply. It started to leak down towards like during team conversations, during team activities, like and people you start hearing Russian. Like I don't know what's going on. We're talking about this topic and there's Russian here. It's hard, and at the end of the day, you find out the real root cause is like people essentially have this need to form cliques in places. So once you have like 3, 4, 5 people, once you start to grow past that scale, like it's not unusual to find artificial boundaries within your team. And it has long-term impacts on a team. It has long-term side effects on how a team works. One of the biggest problems that it causes is like you potentially now have silos, like whereby certain information that is important for all of the team is essentially locked in a group of the team. And it's a risk for any serious business because if one person or a group of people leave the company, they'll potentially leave with important information or skills or things that are central for your team to operate. So it's something that you'd have to actively deal with as a leader to identify some of these boundaries and try to stop it. Not just stop it, but educate your team members about the side effects it has on the team, especially on the long-term effects of the team. So it is one of the biggest challenges I faced in my work leading teams, and one of the one where I actually could not solve on my own. I potentially needed more experienced leadership above me, a more experienced support system to introduce some of those education components about why certain lines are disadvantageous to team chemistry. So that's maybe what I would rank as the top one in my own experience.
Okay. Thank you so much, Wale. Thank you. I
Thank
know you have a meeting by 6 o'clock, so I'm going to let you go real quick. But just in case you don't make it on time, I know it's your fault. For so long. All right, cool. It's really been nice meeting you, Wale, and I'm sure a lot of people will want to go back and review. Unfortunately, we don't have any questions, so I guess it's either most likely it's because you have been very well articulated, and they will actually go back and review the video and download your slides and maybe to see just what you're talking about. And they have many more questions. I always reach out to you personally to ask, and I'm
Yeah.
sure that people want to connect with you. So if you could just of course, will be available to us. We always connect to contact you. Sorry, to
Yeah.
contact you to ensure that there's always a pipeline of conversations between us and you. Thank you so much, Wale. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on social media, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, all 300 of you. And thank you so much. And I hope to see you again next week. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful weekend.